morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Joan Gregory, and I'm past coordinator of environmental ministry, and I'm your host for today's summer forum. Welcome to all our members, friends, and visitors today, and welcome to those who are joining us online. We're so glad that all of you are here with us. Important quick announcement before we get started. The restrooms are through this door behind here, over that way. So, should that be necessary, you know where it is. And our format is to begin with a chalice lighting, an introduction of our speaker, his presentation, and then we will pass the plate to support the church, followed by a Q&A, then announcements, and finally coffee and conversation and information in our social hall, which is also out this door. So let us begin. Our chalice will be lit today by Carole Straughn, a member and leader in our environmental ministry effort. Carole.
Today, while this chalice burns, we will listen to the words of a prophet named Zachary. A voice crying in the wilderness, calling us to put away the false gods of arrogance, power, and money, calling us instead to reference true reality, 13.7 billion years in the making, the interconnected web of existence of which we are all a part, calling us to right relationship with the biosphere that supports us. This prophet calls for environmental justice for all species, including ourselves, who are supported by the rivers of life in our desert. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Thank you, Carole. So, Zach received his BS in biology at the University of Utah and is the executive director of the Utah Rivers Council, which he founded over 30 years ago in 1994. Zach has led many exciting campaigns to protect Utah's rivers and is an expert on Utah water policy. Zach lives with his family and their horses in the Salt Lake Valley and enjoys writing, making short films, and all manner of outdoor sports. Environmental ministry has worked with Zach and the Utah Rivers Council for many, many years now. Our connections include the fact that First Unitarian Church member Liz Waite now serves on the Utah Rivers Council board. Like environmental ministry, Utah Rivers Council is a member of the Stop the Polluting Ports Coalition, represented by Amy Wicks, Northern Utah Program Manager and Great Salt Lake Waterkeeper. Utah Rivers Council has been the recipient in the past of our First Unitarian Church Share the Plate during the regular church year, and environmental ministry shares events and actions hosted or recommended by the Utah Rivers Council with all our over 600 member environmental ministry mailing list. I will now turn the mic over to Zach to talk with us about fact versus fantasy for Great Salt Lake and Colorado River. At the end of his presentation, we will give Zach a few minutes to rest, to catch his breath, while we pass the plate to support First Unitarian Church. And this will be followed by an opportunity for questions and answers. Take it away, Zach.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much. What a kind welcome. Thank you so much. That's very kind. I'm speechless. No one's ever called me a prophet. I have been told lots of things from the other side of the spectrum, which are, not something you repeat on a Sunday in church. And I am so happy to be here today. And I wonder if I could do I need to stand here? Or I guess I do. I can't wander, right? I'm like an 8-year-old. I really have a hard time standing in one place. Is that right?
You can use a wireless mic if you prefer.
And is it okay if I walk around just a little bit? I know, see.
Just make sure you use the mic.
I'm nothing if not a troublemaker. I really appreciate the chance to be here with you all today. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to come speak to the First Unitarian Church and the wonderful leaders from the environmental ministry who have been scholars and counselors for me over the last few years especially. And I'm just really happy to talk to you today about the Colorado River and the Great Salt Lake. As Joan mentioned, we started the Utah Rivers Council back in the fall of 1994 to work on water. And through most of our history, the most commonly asked question we have received is, I don't get it. All you guys do is work on water? For decades, people thought it was simple and easy, and that it was really just a simple matter, and that there wasn't enough to work on until 2022, when the world finally looked to Utah and saw that we have these foundational aquatic ecosystems being completely mismanaged by ignorance, by greed, and even at times by corruption. And then suddenly, it became a very busy space. And in the last few years, we've seen this advocacy landscape change dramatically. And what is interesting about water that has been a career fascination for me is that in many ways, water is symbolic of truth. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is truth. How we want to talk about truth, whether we want to accept truth, how we want those who disagree with us to respond to truth when they hear it. Because sometimes what we do is we use truth as a weapon. We use truth as a criticism. We use truth to insult those who disagree with us. At other times, we use truth as saccharine. We sugar it down. We fatten it up. We try and make it palatable because we feel like our fellow human beings can't handle the truth. And it's a really interesting concept for truth. I don't remember the film, but one of my favorite lines is, "Truth doesn't have versions." And it's interesting to think about. We'll come back to that in a moment. Today, our setting is Utah, the headwaters of the American West. And we're going to talk a little bit about these two watersheds that we're lucky enough to live in that are so important to the rest of North America and, for that matter, the Americas in general. The Colorado River Basin and the Great Salt Lake Basin. Of course, we all know that the Great Salt Lake Basin is a terminal watershed with its waters ending up in the Great Salt Lake and obviously not flowing to the ocean. And the Great Salt Lake is the largest remaining wetland ecosystem in the American West. It has become so critical for 12 million migratory birds traveling from every country in the Americas. When we talk about the Great Salt Lake, we as Utahns often think it is, quote unquote, ours to do what we can, what we want, what we will with it. We rarely think about it as if we are the stewards of this priceless aquatic treasure. And it has been entrusted to us by fellow Americans to manage for future generations of birds and people, and for Americans, and for that matter, our neighbors in Central and South America and their bird refuges, where birds are being, quote unquote, lent to the Great Salt Lake and to Utahns to safeguard. We rarely think about that. The whole conversation is about Utah. And then, of course, the Colorado River Basin, which is the headwaters of the Colorado River inside Utah. The mountains inside Utah along Wyoming and alongside Colorado compose just 1/8 of the landmass of the Colorado River Basin with its 7 states and Mexico. And yet this 1/8 of the landmass, these mountains, provide 7/8 of the water to the Colorado River Basin. So the decisions we make here in Utah have pivotal impacts on 40 million Americans, 1 in 8 Americans. So we need to start thinking about Utah as the crossroads of the West. We need to start thinking about how we embrace the truth, or whether we refuse to embrace the truth, as not just impacting a couple million Utahns, but as impacting myriads of people and birds and generations of future residents across the Western Hemisphere. So I'm going to show, I love movies, and I'm going to show a clip from a great movie that I love. Now, this movie has been, what is it called, appropriated by a number of tribal cultures in America, and some of that is quite controversial and I don't agree with. But I want you to just watch this movie clip as a metaphor for the discussion we're having today, and just be present to what the characters here are talking about.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Who's ready to go down the rabbit hole? Okay, let's do it. Let's start in the Colorado River Basin. So the blue pill that we are told is for decades now that Utah has a surplus of Colorado River water. And we are paying $65 to $70 million a year in sales tax money to go into a fund created by the water district lobbyists of the Utah legislature to divert the Colorado River with the largest new water project in the entire basin called the Lake Powell Pipeline. because we, quote unquote, have a surplus of water. Think about it like money in a bank account. It's just sitting there. There's a surplus of water, right? Trust me, they say. So let's look at that. So this is the flows of the Colorado River for the last 19 years. Well, through 2018. It's a little bit old. And this is just a bar graph of water flows. And this blue line here is the 20th century average of how much water was in the Colorado River. That was last century. Okay? And so those headwater mountains are leading to runoff events. And then this brown line below it is the 21st century average. Now, of course, the 21st century is only 25 years long so far. And so this is what scholars have been in the basin, academic leaders have been trying to showcase climate change and the reduction in snowpack. When we heat up the air, we don't just heat up summer air temperatures, we heat up winter air temperatures. And when we heat up winter air temperatures, the snowpack shrinks. The freeze line moves up the mountain, so there's less snow. And snow is what we drink all year long. Most of the runoff that we use on our farms, that we apply outside our buildings and we drink, 85 to 90% of the water on the Wasatch Front comes from snow melt runoff. So when our snow disappears from climate change, so does all our water. And so what we see by comparing those two periods of record is a 20% drop in flows. And to understand whether there's a surplus of Colorado River water, we need to just know enough about the 103 years of policy making that on the Colorado River Basin. It's called the law of the river. When we talk about the Colorado River, everybody's like, oh, the 1922 compact. Oh, that's how it works, right? That's just one statute, right? That's like pulling a statute from 1922 when the Salt Lake Valley was mostly farmland and saying, hey, I can do whatever I want. There's no zoning restrictions because I found this 1922 code. It's ridiculous. There have been so many other laws passed, but they just want to tell us a part of the story. They don't want to tell us about the 1944 treaty with Mexico that we have to deliver 1.5 million acre feet to our neighbors in Mexico, who, of course, have been using the Colorado River since before it was a country. They don't want to talk to us about the 1948 Upper Basin Compact, another statute that the states agreed to. And all of this complicated policy architecture basically translates into two very simple things. The first is that these four Upper Basin states, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, must deliver 7.5 million acre feet of water to our neighbors in California, Arizona, and Nevada. That is the law that we agreed to. First thing, they get 7.5 million. They get the first 7.5 million. The second thing is Mexico gets 1.5 million on top of that. So now we're at 9 million acre feet. And then the upper states, according to the agreement they made more than 75 years ago, they get the remainders, they get the leftovers. It's like going into a diner to get a slice of pie and learning that the chef is making a smaller pie pan and half of the fellow diners already have been given their slices. We get the leftovers. So if you do the math, right, we're quibbling over about 3 million acre feet of water. Okay, well, so is there a surplus? Well, depends on how much water's in the system, right? If there's more water, there's more leftovers. If there's less water, there's less leftovers. So this bar here, this line, if this is the Colorado River water supply going up and down this hill, depending on how much snow Mother Nature gives us, right? Then when there's more water than what we're using on this horizontal line, there's a surplus. And when there's less water, there's a deficit. And so here is what we've been at. This is where we're on this hill for the 21st century, for 25 years. There is no surplus. And if you want to see that same data in tabular form, I'm nothing if not a data geek. You can see it right here. This line is the 21st century average. Here are the 4 upper basin states showing their leftovers. If anybody wants to, write notes about what the deficit is. Utah's using 200,000 acre feet more water every year than we're entitled to. Ouch. How can we not accept that? Why does the Utah legislature, why are they not willing to accept that? Now, what do we do when an audience does not want to hear what we have to say? Do we kiss the rings? Or do we hold them accountable for truth? Depends on what your design parameters are around truth. Depends on whether being popular is more important than being truthful. It's a tough question to answer individually. And that just assumes there's only a 20% drop in flows, meaning that just assumes we're done having impacts from climate change, meaning we're at the bottom. There's no more snowpack reductions from increased temperatures. If there's a 30% decrease or a 40% decrease before we bottom out, then the deficits for Utah are even more severe. 200,000 acre feet is where we're at now. To give you an idea, the entire Salt Lake Valley uses 350,000 acre feet of water per year. This is why America's 2 largest reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, are declining. The savings account is going away. And we have real trouble as a community talking about it. Our media has trouble reporting on this issue, even though I have begged reporters over coffee meetings and phone calls repeatedly to cover this. Even though I can go to Arizona and the state is issuing newsletters about, quote unquote, the Colorado River shortage. Here in Utah, we refuse to embrace this idea that climate change is reducing our flows. So if the blue pill is that Utah has a surplus of Colorado River water it should use before other states take it, the reality of the red pill is that Utah is overusing its rights to the Colorado River and will soon have to cut its use. Do you want your elected officials telling you the truth or not? Because if not, you need to find some new elected officials, right? It's a choice, the red pill or the blue pill. The other piece about the Colorado River I'm going to talk about is this idea that we can decide whether to keep Lake Powell or not. It's up to us. Let's have a debate about it. Should we keep it? Should we have Glen Canyon or not? It's up to us. We're man, after all, right? So let's take a little trip. This is Lake Powell at Height Bridge. If you've ever driven across Height Bridge, you're looking to the west downstream. This photo was taken around the turn of the century. If those of you in the back can't see, these little dots, those are big motorboats. And this right here is the ramp where one would take out with their motorboat and put it on the trailer, okay? So just look at this for a moment, and let's jump forward to the year 2025 and see what Lake Powell looks like. It is gone. It is gone. In fact, if you think about it, if you said, where should we put 150 years ago, where should we put America's second largest reservoir? I know, let's put it in the driest part of the country. Wait, what? That's like going to find homeless people and say, let's give them big savings accounts with no money. This is that boat ramp right here in this red circle. Let's go to that boat ramp and see what it looks like. You want to put a boat where? Right? We don't have a choice about Lake Powell's future. It's disappearing. The sooner we can have a conversation about it without criticizing those who are pointing out the basic reality, you can't put a boat in there, the sooner we can proceed to a future with less impact. Because when they built Lake Powell and they built Glen Canyon Dam, they they never thought about climate change. The Bureau of Reclamation came and they figured we're going to fill up Lake Powell and it'll be there all the time. And so to get the water downstream, we're going to build these hydropower tubes. And that's how we're going to deliver water to the lower basin. That's 7.5 million plus 1.5 million to Mexico. The 9 million acre feet, we're going to go through these hydropower penstocks, and we don't need to worry about it thereafter, right? The problem is they didn't go, what if there's no water, right? And the reason that matters is if you take a cross section of the dam, here's those hydropower tubes that we generate hydroelectricity. And as the water levels drop, we don't get to use them anymore. And we have to go to these maintenance tubes called river outlet works that were never designed to deliver 9 million acre feet, incidentally, to the Grand Canyon and the ecosystem there that relies upon the precious flows of this amazing desert exotic river. It's exotic, just like the Nile, because many of the beneficiaries of this river are so very far away. And so hydrologists call rivers exotic when they go a very long distance before they reach their large population's water supply. And we're messing with that. So as the water drops in Lake Powell, we have to shift. At 3,490 feet above sea level, when that's the surface of Lake Powell, when that drops below those turbines intakes, we will violate our agreement to the lower basin states. Now, we can ignore that. We can pretend like politically this state of 3 million people can take on Las Vegas and Phoenix and Orange County and Los Angeles and San Diego, and the 60 or 70 members of the House in Congress. But we are fools to think we will survive. So what we need to do is start thinking about a Lake Powell without a lake there. We need to think about Glen Canyon. We need to think about how to get water back like it flowed. Because once the elevation reaches 3430, we violated our agreements to deliver water to the lower Colorado River Basin states, and it's 30 million people, all right? When it reaches 3370, that's it. There's no more water going downstream. It's locked. The only water coming in through the system at 3370 is what can go out, all right? And that's called dead pool. And this is work we did with two really wonderful organizations, Glen Canyon Institute and the Great Basin Water Network, really good partners. Glen Canyon Institute has been working to ask questions about a post-Lake Powell future for decades, and we love them as partners, alongside GBWN, that's been spearheading advocacy and protection for the West Desert of Utah and Nevada. So really fine organizations that you might want to have speak one day. This is Glen Canyon Dam during construction of Lake Powell. You can see the Colorado River here upstream, right? It's kind of an amazing photo to me. And what the solution to this simple plumbing problem is just to restore water coming at river elevation. Those are called bypass tubes. Super easy. Our three organizations have been begging Congress and the Bureau to get after this, to deliver water to 30 million people downstream. Guess what? We can't do it. We can't get them to deliver water to the basin, and so the lower basin. And so that means this is going to even further expedite the cutting of water, curtailment inside Utah. Because our water leaders and our elected officials and our appointed government refuse to deal with this plumbing problem, simple plumbing problem. So the reality of Lake Powell is that it's going to disappear, and the sooner we deal with Glen Canyon Dam, the longer we have before we must cut water. That's a red pill, right? Let's move on to water conservation. Let's look at statewide water conservation, because there have been so many headlines over the last couple of years about how great Utah is doing in conserving water. So This is the water use of our cities in Utah. This is the average, according to the Utah Division of Water Resources. Every man, woman, and child in the cities of Utah use 245 gallons of municipal water, city water only, no farm water, city water, per day. Almost 250 gallons of water per person per day. So it's hard to know what that means without some relative data. So here's Denver. Denver residents use 100 gallons less water per person per day, every single day of the year. Okay. The US average is 140, 138, all right? Tucson's using 122, LA 124, Phoenix 111. Utah is the number one highest municipal water user per person in the US. We're the most wasteful water user in the United States. Kind of amazing, because America is probably the biggest per person municipal water user on the planet. We won. This is the state's official water conservation plan. Now, Utah Rivers Council in 1998, we wrote the Water Conservation Plan Act of Utah, the first water conservation law in the state. And so we've been working on water conservation in the municipal sector for decades. And this is the state's official goals for conserving water. And let's step outside of Utah again, and let's look at some of our sister western states and see how they're doing. And let's think about it in percent cuts per year. So Las Vegas, right? Las Vegas has cut 2.6% of its water use per year for 18 years, between 2002 and 2020. Not just a year or two, 18 years. It's funny, because when you say Las Vegas, everybody's like, oh, what about those fountains? I was like, well, these fountains are just a little bit of this massive valley, right? So Las Vegas is one of the leaders in water conservation in the American West. And here's some other cities, right? So what we see, Tucson, Sacramento, Albuquerque, Phoenix, LA, Denver, and California in the municipal center. And these are different time periods. 2013 to 2018, 2005 to 2015. I won't walk you through all the data, but you can see that other communities are saving 2, 3, 4% over a sustained period of time, every single year, okay? Now, reminder, we're the most wasteful water user in the country. Think about it like credit card spending. Your credit card spending is out of control. You gotta cut it down. Your spouse comes home, says, honey, we're cutting our credit card spending. We're getting serious about it. We are gonna cut our spending. Here's all kinds of news stories. I'm gonna show up adjacent to the Great Salt Lake and tell you about how much I care about water conservation. So what's the number for Utah? It's massive. If your spouse said to you, we're cutting credit card spending by 0.5%, you'd be like, if you're having cocktails, can you make me one? That's a 50-year period. And why is this? I don't understand. Water is altruistic. These people care, don't they? Water is a commodity that is sold to make money. Do we expect people to voluntarily cut oil extraction? Do we expect people to voluntarily sell less gasoline or natural gas or electricity? No. We don't have that level of naivete. We understand that there are financial interests benefiting from the sale of these commodities, except when it comes to water. And then we expect altruism. And I wonder if that's true. So I would say the red pill there is that Utah's America's most wasteful water user and is opposed to meaningful water conservation. Now, I've been a registered lobbyist for about 25 years, because after I started Utah Rivers Council, I went and had a foray in Hollywood, which is another story for another time, and other people ran the fine organization, did a great job while I was gone. But I've been lobbying state legislators for decades. And the thing that I used to hear before 2022 is, but Zach, water entering the Great Salt Lake is wasted. we should divert it upstream. So let's jump into the Great Salt Lake, because what we've heard in the last few years is that Utah leaders are really committed to saving the Great Salt Lake. They're suddenly, boom, all those arguments about whether water entering the lake is wasted, those are gone. So put them in the corner, turn the light the other direction, don't look under the carpet, right? So how are we doing on the Great Salt Lake? Well, so this is the historic rise and fall of the Great Salt Lake. This black line is the minimum healthy level, 4,198 feet above sea level. We have a campaign called the 4200 Project. If you just remember those two words, 4200 Project, you can go find a comprehensive solution to these and other problems in water in Utah to deliver more water to the Great Salt Lake through simple basic data and research and truth. And so for most of this century, right, here's the year 2000, the Great Salt Lake has declined, right? This massive increase was essentially wet years, the 83, 84, biggest water year in 40 years, right? What's interesting is those of you, I'm sure, remember just a couple years ago, the 23 to 24 winter was the biggest winter since this period. But look how the Great Salt Lake didn't recover, even though the winter, the snowpack and the runoff was about the same. It's because we increased upstream water diversions so very much. And so the Great Salt Lake, at the record low of 2022, 4188.5, needs 8 million acre feet. And how much water is that? Well, if every man, woman, and child in northern Utah stopped using water for a year, and every farmer in all of northern Utah stopped using water for a year, it would still take 4.5 years to fill the Great Salt Lake. We'd literally have to abandon this basin for 5 years. Okay? So when we read a headline that we're supposedly delivering a few thousand acre feet of water to the Great Salt Lake, we really need to look at the numbers. We're draining the savings account that is the lake. So how much water do we need? Well, it's just like a mortgage. If we're going to refill the Great Salt Lake in 10 years, we need to deliver 1.1 million acre feet per year for each of those 10 years. If we're doing 20 years, we need about 750, 800,000 acre feet per year. That's additional to the water entering it from the rivers, okay? All of the efforts combined over the last few years deliver between 50 and 80,000 acre feet. We are so far from accomplishing this. The state is aware of this. They're fully knowledgeable about this. We tried to get what we thought was a pretty harmless resolution, really just a statement. And we approached Senator Nate Bluen, who is a wonderful legislative leader with tons of courage. He is the kind of person we need to lead us through this crisis. He is not going to kiss the rings of power. He is going to speak truth. And he ran this resolution, and we couldn't even get it out of committee. And all it did was say we should establish a minimum elevation goal for the Great Salt Lake of 4198. The governor called this a dumb idea. So the Great Salt Lake is really two lakes. And this is really important to understand. This is the north arm of the Great Salt Lake. This is the south arm. It's kind of hard to tell, but these are two different colors. And water is flowing from the south arm into the north arm because all the rivers that flow into the Great Salt Lake come in from the south arm and they flow north through this gap. State of Utah wants to close this gap. We've been fighting legislation that would allow this differential in these two water levels to be as much as 5 feet different. Right now it's 18 months before they have to dump water from the south arm into the north arm. The Senate president is openly telling people we should just close off the north arm. I hear state agency staff members say that all the time, not because they're bad people, but because they know we're not making hardly any progress in restoring and saving the Great Salt Lake. right? So the north arm is 40% of the Great Salt Lake surface area, and they're ready to close it off. In fact, they just passed a bill to allow a more robust regulatory mechanism to keep water flowing. I'd like to play a quick news story from Fox 13 covering our lawsuit. We're part of a coalition of groups suing the state of Utah to try and implement some solutions to save the lake.
Environmental groups take the state to court over the Great Salt Lake.
The fundamental question we are asking ourselves today in this court of law is, should the Great Salt Lake exist in the future or not?
I'm Ben Winslow at the Matheson Courthouse. The state is being accused of not doing enough to save the Great Salt Lake in violation of Utah's Constitution.
A judge heard arguments on Tuesday from state agencies, utilities, cities, canal companies, and local water districts. They're asking her to throw out a lawsuit filed by a coalition of environmental groups. The Great Salt Lake dropped to its lowest level in recorded history back in 2022 as a result of water diversions, drought, and impacts from climate change. A declining lake presents a threat to public health, wildlife, and Utah's economy, with reduced snowpack, toxic dust storms, and other problems. That triggered this lawsuit. But in court, lawyers for the state argued the public trust doctrine doesn't explicitly cover water.
Taking that position to its logical extreme, then the state could divert or allocate all water that goes to the Great Salt Lake and essentially eliminate it as a lake. Is that the state's position?
That's correct.
So just so we're on the same page, yep, just so everybody saw that. The judge, the state could eliminate the lake. Is that correct? State of Utah attorneys, that is correct. They have the legal authority to dry up the lake. Now, in my work, I would say, honestly, Utah leaders are actively planning to shrink the lake to about 30% of its size. They want it to go away. So we need to understand that if we're going to implement solutions. I see no benefit to embracing this fantasy because these people work for us, right? So let's pause for a minute because people come to me and say, Zach, this is a bummer. I go, yeah, man, it is. Have you thought about spinning it more positively? It's a tough one. I don't want to tune people out. I just want to be honest. I've thought a lot about this presentation today, and I've asked myself questions I've never had to ask myself. How do I defend the need for truth? I mean, I personally believe if I'm not truthful with myself, then I don't understand what's happening around me. I can't hear my own intuition. I can't hear my gut whisper to me if I'm not truthful with myself. But I've never stopped to ask, hey, make an argument for why we should be truthful. An ant wanders out of its lair in the morning. It is so small. Everything in the world can kill it. Everything. And yet, it has to proceed without the hive. They don't all go out all the time in mass numbers. They go out alone, and they have faith. They have faith. Not because they predict the future, not because they've got a PhD, because they have faith in the universe. Truth is not something that has versions, but faith does. If we believe in ourselves, if we believe in each other, we can accomplish anything we want. If we want to embrace fear, then we have to hold ourselves accountable for being afraid. We have to wander out into that wilderness, but the rest of the hive is behind us. They will join us if we take the lead. So, don't be discouraged. You say, the problem with the Great Salt Lake is that farmers are using too much water. It's their fault. right? And the reason that we say that, right, here's a photo of Mount Olympus, and this was a farm in 1887, photo courtesy Utah State Historical Society. And agriculture does use 80 to 85% of the water in Utah every single year. Very consistent with all of the western states. Because the agricultural water system this farmer used in 1887 is pretty similar to the one being used today in 2025. They're land rich and cash poor. A lot of these farmers who I know, as Joan said, I have horses. We buy 10 tons of alfalfa a year. I have wonderful relationships with farmers. Some of these guys make $2 or $3 an hour, right? So they don't have money to replace their canal systems with $100 million delivery systems. And so we're losing 30 acres of this precious farmland every single day, and we're growing this commodity instead. And ironically, it's creating a surplus of water because this landscape to the left uses less water per square foot than the landscape to the right, right? And so we're creating a surplus. And you don't have to believe me. You can take the word of the auditors in 2015 that came out with this chapter 4 of the audit. And when I read the title to this was an audit we got initiated, took 18 months. Hilarious stories around this I'd love to tell you afterwards. I know I'm running out of time. When I read this title, I was like, wow, that's a brilliant way to talk about what's happening to water in Utah. We're paving our irrigated farmland, and it's creating a surplus of water, right? Why? Well, this is municipal space. We're not irrigating this carpet, right? If this was farmland, we might go through 10 feet of water vertically in the course of a year to grow 3 crops. But we're not irrigating this carpet or the roof, and the amount of water in the bathrooms is minimal. Even when we have grass landscapes, we've built roads and sidewalks and parking lots and shopping malls and subdivisions that are using much less water per square foot. So we're creating a surplus, but we're not converting the water. And so this is a really smart chapter title because it says the growth in future water supply should be reported to policymakers. 2 operatives. Municipal water supply is growing, and you should tell someone. How about a little bit of red pill here? Why should it be reported to policymakers? Because there are special interests in that state house, namely water district lobbyists and contractors, that are trying to convince us to spend $6 to $10 billion in new construction projects to divert the water supply of the Great Salt Lake via the Bear River and divert the Colorado River. Why? Because it's their bread and butter. It's how they make money. If I worked for a company that wanted a $3 billion construction contract, that'd be what I'd be advocating for. Just chosen a different path. So they're not bad people. They're just not being honest, right? That's the revelation of this chapter. And so it makes sense, right? We're converting this massive water sector, but we're not really converting it. This is what used to be an irrigation canal, right? That's Jolly's Pharmacy. It's 13th South and 11th East. It used to be Costa's. I'm sorry, I don't know what it is now, right here. This is a canal here in Salt Lake City that has 50 exchange contracts, 50 canals in our capital city that we are pretending is a good use of water so that these folks can flood, irrigate grass in Salt Lake City. Oh, that is such a hard pill to swallow. I go to a water conservation conference every year with water conservation staff from cities and counties across the country, 3,200 counties, 3,200 counties and I think there's about 19,000 cities. And there's a ton of people from these conservation teams coming to talk about water conservation. And I go, what do you guys do with your secondary water? And they go, what are you talking about? And I go, your irrigation canals that are through the middle of the city. And they go, are you dumb, boy? We converted that to a municipal supply decades ago. Folks, this is Great Salt Lake water that's flowing through our gutters. It's not a fire hydrant someone left on. It's a water right that our Utah legislators are too afraid to regulate. That's partly why we want this lawsuit to proceed. There is so much water available. The good news here, it'd be really easy to save the Great Salt Lake if we could just change a couple of policies. It's not like we're trying to put people out of work. This water's just being used by water rights holders that are putting in sump pumps to suck this water out of the gutter and flood irrigate grass with it. Holy smokes. It's nuts, right? So the reality is that Utah refuses to regulate the non-use of water rights. That's what we refuse to do. So I just want to end. I think I'm out of time. As usually, I broke the rules. I'm good at that. I want to just talk about two things, all right? The first is that we need to get rid of the property tax for water because we're collecting taxes on our homes, our businesses, and even our automobiles to lower the price of municipal water. That's why we have the cheapest municipal water in the country and the highest per person municipal use. This supposedly conservative, supposedly free market state is collecting these taxes to lower the price of water. And we surveyed 300 audited financial statements from water suppliers outside Utah, and we found that on average, their revenue streams from outside Utah, all these water suppliers, they only get 9% of their revenue from property taxes. And here in Utah, we love taxes so much that we collect almost 3 times that rate in property taxes so that we all have the cheapest water. And for that matter, University of Utah, which uses about 15% of all the water in Salt Lake City, doesn't pay a cent of property taxes. The LDS Church, exempt, doesn't pay any property taxes. There's no equity here. I mention this because Jordan Valley Water District, delivering water in the southwest corner of Salt Lake County, is having a property tax increase. They want to raise the tax. There's a public hearing on August 11, Monday at 6 p.m. in a couple of weeks. I'll be out. Oh, I'm sorry. Joan, could you pass that sign-up sheet? I'm going to pass. Joan's passing around the sign-up sheet if you want to sign up for more information or come talk to us at the table. We'd love to have you attend the hearing. You don't have to speak, but we'll be there trying to offer truth to power. So there's just one more thing I want to end on. This is proposed Bear River development. This is a disaster, but I already mentioned that. Here we go. Now, one thing that I encounter a lot, and I know there was a good representative last week who basically presented this fantasy to us. The only way to convince the Utah legislature to save the Great Salt Lake is to essentially what I say, kiss the rings of power. Be sweet, be respectful, sit down and shut up, Zach. We don't want any more red pills. Just be sweet and kind. And look, I can kiss the rings repeatedly. We got legislation passed in 2002 to remove 2 TAM sites on the Bear River. It was passed unanimously on every vote in the Utah legislature except for the House floor, and it was still 72 in favor to 3 opposed. I can be sweet and kind, I promise, okay? But that is not going to get us out of this jam. In this movie, The Matrix, Neo doesn't say, you know what, I'm gonna stick with the blue pill because I just wanna be popular, sweet and kind. The reality is, if we're going to save the Great Salt Lake, if we're gonna implement water solutions, we need to manage our employees. We need to hold our elected and appointed government officials accountable. Does anybody think that the national ethos, the problem that we're experiencing today, this historic and often depressing era that we're living through right now, the solution is to kissing the rings of power? Does anybody believe that we should just be nicer? And that we're going to find that the other side that is laying off our essential federal employees, that is gutting Medicare, that is getting ready to create the worst deficit that America has ever seen with no plan to get out besides cutting Social Security? Does anybody really think the solution is to just be nicer? We need to fight. We need to stand up. We need to hold our employees accountable. And thank heavens we live in a democracy, because the only form of government worse than democracy is everything else. And with that, I thank you for your time today.
Wow. Thank you, Zach. Thank you so much. We are now going to give Zach a moment to rest his voice, maybe grab a little bit of water there, and as we pass the plate in support of the work of First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. This is also a great time to meet and greet the person sitting next to you in the pew. The collection will be followed by a Q&A. So meet and greet each other, and as Brian and Colette pass the plates. So just a couple of reminders. We need you to use the microphone so that people watching via Zoom will be able to hear what your question is, or those who are using hearing-assisted devices can also hear. Please keep your question succinct. No lectures, please. We want to, figure another 15 or 20 minutes for questions, and then you will get your coffee. But keep those questions as questions, not lectures. So, Colleen, go ahead. Colleen is going to move around. Please raise your hand. So, Lance has the first question.
In protest, I live in a mobile home community, and I put gravel in the front yard, and I let the backyard lawn totally die to nothing. So that's my contribution to the Great Salt Lake.
That's excellent. Thank you for doing that. One quick thing on that, because Lance lives on a very, very small lot, his monthly water use is very, very small. Probably less than 5,000 gallons, maybe less than 3,000 gallons. Homes around here might use 50,000, 70,000 gallons in a month. Not uncommon for people to use 100,000 gallons at their home. I mention it because the property tax for Lance is especially regressive, given how small his total water budget is. His property taxes are going on his home and on his car, on his housing and his car, are going to lower the price for large lot landowners here to use water and suppressing the municipal rate so that we don't have enough money in the municipal sector to buy water from canals in the agricultural sector. So the simple path he's taking is wonderful, but the inequity remains. Something to contemplate.
Hi, I'm Scott. My question is, what are your thoughts on the real impact of Deadpool?
The real impact of Deadpool's a disaster, just so we're on the same page. He's asking about what happens when Lake Powell, the water is stuck there and it can't get through that lower set of tubes and it just sits there. It's a disaster, okay? So first of all, that water is just gonna evaporate and the compounds are gonna concentrate and it's gonna turn into a blue-green algae mess, just like we've seen in other static water bodies that warm, and all the oxygen leaves the water column and it's called anoxic, and then the fish die. And when that happens, then the algae explode and they release all these toxins as a byproduct of their growth, which like kill dogs and make people sick. dead pool is such a bad idea. We need to not have any dead pool. There's just no reason to have dead pool. So, everybody's so afraid, not everybody, but so many people are so afraid of Glen Canyon restored. And I'm like, man, I got to start thinking about what boat I'm going to buy to run Glen Canyon, because it is going to be a absolute treasure for rural economies when people from all over the world get the chance to float this amazing canyon called Glen Canyon. Let's just get rid of it. Let's just fix the plumbing. I mean, your plumbing breaks in your house, you don't go, well, just don't use that sink. Did I answer your question?
Thank you. So I want to move from one side to the next and maybe then on to online. And so on this side, Bill?
Could you just explain a little bit more about the agricultural issue? I mean, my understanding is that, as you pointed out, they're using the lion's share of the water. So I assume the solution is with agriculture. Can you just explain a little bit more like what you recommend there?
Yeah, you bet. Great question. Using is really the word to deconstruct and think about. So, if I'm a farmer and I'm diverting a water from a river here, and I have to get it to the other side of the wall, right, to that wall. If I want a gallon over there, I don't take a gallon here and tip it, right, because the canal is not like this. The canal is just a mild gradient. We call this concept head pressure, meaning if I want a gallon to that wall from just here, whatever that's 25 feet, 20 feet away, I need to divert like 10 gallons here, because the 10 gallons is going to start 10, and then I'm going to lose 2, and then I'm going to lose 2 more, I'm going to lose 2 more, I'm going to lose 2 more. I didn't divert enough water. I just need to get a gallon here. Studies demonstrate that for every 1 gallon used on the field, 8 gallons are diverted to get it there. These canals were constructed oftentimes in the 19th century. They're full of dirt. They're dirt canals. They're not concrete, and they're not in pipes, because farmers make $2 to $3 an acre foot. $2 to $3 an hour. They don't have $100 million to install pressurized irrigation or concrete in their canals. So it's not that they're using 85% of the water on their fields, is that they're diverting 85% of the water to get maybe 10 or 20% of it used. Because the money has to come from the cities, and that's the idea. But we're not doing it. We're pretending like we're doing it, but we're not doing it. We need to stop demonizing the agricultural community, because, you know what? Agriculture is open space, and we love open space. It provides habitat for our critters, provides food. It is a reservoir of knowledge among tribal populations for growing a future food supply. It's resilience in the face of climate change. Let's not turn it into a Walmart. Let's protect it. Let's save our open space. And if I could, I'd just like to recognize the grace that I have received in my life by marrying this woman in the back, Wendy Fisher from Utah Open Lands. And Utah Open Lands is a land trust that's been working to protect farmland and wildlife habitat and recreational open spaces for 35 years. I got that right, and has protected 65,000 acres of Utah. We need to protect these farmlands, and we need to convert the water from the lands that have already been turned into blacktop. See, I'm really good at grandstanding really long answers to these questions.
Alan? It's right behind you. There you go.
I dare say that, and I'll keep this lecture real short, but I think that waters that are used in the irrigation system often go to something beyond grass. There's innumerable crops and fruit harvests and things that come from that irrigation.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the saddest thing is when we lose prime farmland, which is really high productive soils, and we lose orchards. Utah County was full of orchards 30 years ago. Wonderful. I mean, can you imagine how much fresh fruit we would have locally grown? So much more. I mean, don't get me wrong, wonderful, resilient, burgeoning local farmers shifting their crops to orchards is fantastic. It's wonderful. We're so lucky to have so much good food in America. But that's absolutely right. We really need to think about saving agriculture and stop demonizing it while we ignore how we use water in the urban sector.
Okay. The woman at the back, at the door.
Thank you. So what about that water that runs down the gutters? What about that water that runs down our shower drain? Does that end up in the Great Salt Lake ultimately?
Some of it definitely does end up in the Great Salt Lake, but remember that it came from a river. The Great Salt Lake needs its rivers. It doesn't need people flushing the toilet an extra time, as the Senate president said in committee. I flushed my toilet twice for the Great Salt Lake. It's an embarrassing water conservation solution. Verbatim, like I could probably go find you the committee meeting where he said that. The secondary canals, that water needs to go back to the river, but we need to change the Utah law that prevents conservation groups like mine from owning that water permanently in the river. It's called an in-stream flow. Other states say, look, this is a private property right, and if Utah Rivers Council or Utah Open Land wants to go buy water and put it in the river as a legal right, they should have the liberty as Americans to be able to do that. Utah legislature says, no, that's illegal. We'll let you do it short term, but we're not going to approve it as a permanent right. It's like saying, we're going to dictate where you get to drive your car, even though you own it. Doesn't make any sense. The Great Salt Lake is obviously for everybody's best interest. If these people really care about the lake, why won't they let us change one sentence of Utah code to allow us to buy these canals? Many of these canal companies are on the verge of bankruptcy. They are struggling to survive because who wants to install a sump pump on their gutter and pump water out of it? They want a computer that is automatically watering their grass. They don't want to mess with it. Oh, I'm going to go out at midnight. This is my water right, and put it in, plug it in. That's ridiculous, right? We should buy those companies out. We should deliver that water to the Great Salt Lake, but we should allow private nonprofits like Utah Rivers Council and Utah Open Lands to own that water, because I'm never going to build a dam with it. It floats into the ground, seeps into the ground, goes in the aquifer, which is not really that great when the Great Salt Lake is struggling. Or some of it will, once the soil is saturated, flow over into the lake. It also covers our urban spaces, collects all kinds of household hazardous waste and bits of rubber from our tires, and deposits those things into the lake. I'm just like full of optimism and sunniness. If you guys want to record this, you can market it for like nighttime to go to sleep,
So can I go? So I'm from out of town, so I don't have a sense of whether or not there's growing public pressure over this issue of water, and if that is the biggest lever for putting pressure on state legislators. If that's not the biggest lever, what is or what are the biggest levers?
Boy, that's probably the most important question. This two-part question, let me answer this second piece first. Is, in my opinion, yes, grassroots pressure, grassroots organizing, holding our elected and appointed government accountable is our only way out of this mess. It's not being sweet and kind and hoping that that is going to do it in and of itself. Let's be sweet and kind. Let's be respectful. Let's be kind. But let's hold our employees accountable in government. Basic concept that Republicans are actually doing a pretty good job of. So absolutely. The first question is a big one, tough one to answer. Is there a groundswell? In 2022, there was a groundswell. And what I have seen is a massive propaganda campaign that I can document with science. Biased media reporting that only quotes water lobbyists, failure to muckrake, a failure by the media to hold our elected government accountable. Media is the solution. But solutions-oriented journalism, we need to be careful of whether it turns into saccharine. You know, when we went at Watergate, we didn't go, gosh, you know, if Richard Nixon orchestrated a break-in of the Democratic National Headquarters, we need to really sell that in a really positive way. You know, we're losing the war in Vietnam, but we got to be really positive about it. Why? Tell the truth. Muckraking, investigation is the role of media. It is the fourth estate. That is our solution. And it's tough because the media has shrunk 75% in staff time since the turn of the century. So we're getting into this Orwellian era where the outlets don't have enough money to do much more than recycle a press release from the water lobbyists. They don't have time to call someone like Zach Frankel and say, tell us about the red pill. It's a tough time. Tough time for them, tough time for us.
So our last question is going to be with Carole Straughn up here in the front. Thank you.
So I've been preaching this, be nice, find common ground with your legislators, especially your Republican legislators. We have a project to get people to write letters to our legislators. Is that a waste of time? Is the only thing we can do is try to defeat them in elections?
Really great question, Carole. And, you know, thank you so much for your kind and insightful introduction. I don't want to make it a black and white because I think that a lot of times we're on a spectrum of gray scales. And knowledge is not a switch that's either on or off. It's a series of grays that we can learn more and more and more and get more to truth. So what we need to, so first of all, the letter writing, absolutely wonderful. Relationship building, absolutely wonderful. It is absolutely the most important thing you can do in this world if you care about anything, is hold your employees accountable. And yes, it is possible. We've been able to succeed in passing legislation because we're doing the exact same thing you're doing. We're just sticking with it year after year after year. What I am trying to suggest is that being respectful, allowing us to disagree, but allowing us to understand the compassion we can find in those who disagree with us. You know, I've known so many legislators for so long, and when they leave, they often tell me, I'm leaving because I can do more from the outside than from within. I had one wonderful representative tell me, you know, Zach, you have more power than I do inside the House. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, look, you have the ability to influence people that I can't do as an appointed official, as an elected official, not appointed, elected. And so it is really potent. You just have to understand that, hey, you're my employee, I'm gonna be respectful. This is what we want. If I could do one legislative meeting this month, and I could get this many people to turn out for one representative for an hour, and present this presentation, where I'm not, like, you don't have to agree with me. Let's ask these people, do you want to save the lake? Do you think this is a good idea? Is this a good policy? Is this enough? They will work for you. And I have seen it again and again and again. I had a senator, I did this, and I was in a basement of this wonderful constituent of Utah Rivers Council, and I said, the same thing, organize a neighborhood meeting with your senator. And the senator is a little bit arrogant, and he's gone now. But he walks in the door, and he knows me, right? Because I've lobbied him many times. And he shakes my hand, and he's like, Zach, who are all these people? And I'm like, these are your constituents. And he doesn't believe me. And I'm like, look, sit down. We got 2 chairs for you here. We're going to talk about water, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, Zach, I'll do that in a minute. First, I'm going to go through every single person. I'm going to shake their hand, and then I want you to tell me where you're from. Because he thought I was lying to him. And I'm like, man, knock yourself out. So he goes through every aisle, and he comes up, and he is white. And he's like, these are all my constituents. And I'm like, yeah, man, I already told you that. Have a seat. And that was it. He was my sponsor anytime I wanted it, and he was a Republican. It works. The power works. That's the good news about the red pill. We have power. We're taught to believe we don't have power. That's the trick. If you think you don't have power, you give it away. If you understand that you have innate power, you have it. It's someone much wiser than me once said, people don't take our power away from us, we give it away.
Thank you so much, Zach. Thank you. I think it's time that we start having some meetings in our living rooms or our basements and writing some of those letters that Carole was talking about to our legislators and invite them to those meetings with all of their constituents in our homes or spaces. There are a few little announcements that I want to share. Just a couple of reminders. Sunday night potluck and service. Potluck at 5:30 and service at 6:15. We have several activities this week, like the Jam Sing-Along and the Women's Circle. Look at the torch for the information about those. There's no burrito making this week, but next week they'll be ready for hands on Thursday to help with that on the 31st. And August 9th is when the next Circle Suppers are. They're still looking for folks who might want to join. So get in touch with Circle Supper at slcuu.org. Now just 2 more. Well, one is, remember, we are competing for the Golden Celery Award to bring food donations for Crossroads Urban Center. So pack your car up with heavy cans of food next Sunday and bring them in so that, and you leave them at the social justice table. Next week, our topic for Summer Forum will be Building Trans and Queer Power. J.C. Thornton, Executive Director of Project Rainbow, will be our speaker. And the following Sunday, on August 3rd, our topic will be Fire in Utah in a Warming Climate, presented by USU watershed and environmental professors Patrick Belmont and Paul Rogers. So I'm figuring that many of you may be interested, especially in the one on August 3rd, but also in the one on July 27th. So now it's time. Please join us for coffee and conversation in Elliott Hall. Zach has agreed to stay longer and is glad to answer your questions in Elliott Hall at the table. Let him go and grab some coffee first and get to the table, and then he can answer your questions and even show you a rain barrel that I believe that he has to share.
We have rain barrels for sale. I got one here, and there's more sign-up sheet that we got tons at our office.
Okay, Zach, the door's there.
Okay.
Oh, I'm supposed to put out the. So we will extinguish the chalice. Choo-doom. There we go.